Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of Policy Manthan. Today, our topic of discussion is equity in the education system. Before that, I would request all the speakers to write down their names and their topics of discussion in the chat box. I would also request everybody to switch on their cameras so that we can have an interactive session. Okay, so also before the session starts, a kindly reminder that this is an interactive and constructive discussion focusing solely on school education. Therefore, I would urge each one of you to reserve your thoughts to the same and refrain from the use of any dialogue that might be hurtful to any religion, culture, or race. So, coming to today's discussion, equity in education system simply refers to an educational structure where all citizens are provided with an equal opportunity and access to quality education, irrespective of their socio-economic background, gender, race, language, or any other distinguishing factor, be it personal or cultural. The Indian subcontinent is a unique myriad of cultures, races, religions, and even languages. And while this adds to the beauty of the country, it also comes with various inequalities in the availability and accessibility of the educational resources. Often we find how people of particular races or genders are obstructed from receiving education, despite education being a fundamental right to all citizens of the country under Article 21A of the Constitution. Therefore, today's policy manthan is to understand and share our findings on where India stands in ensuring that all students of the country, irrespective of their background, have access to high quality education and the methods and policies that have been adopted to create this equity. I would once again urge the speakers to mention their names and topics in the chat box. Over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Sneha. I would like to invite Avni to speak on the barriers to educational equity. So, Avni, you will start now.
Thank you so much. I think right now there are a multitude of barriers that exist to educational equity because of the way the system is structured, because of the way societal perceptions work, which is really harmful because the sheer importance of education in everyone's lives, in transforming a person, often allowing them to access opportunities and pulling themselves out of poverty. Specifically here, I want to talk about three gaps that exist. The first is funding gaps. That is, often you see private schools having a lot of money because often they're funded by corporations or richer people, but public schools don't receive enough money. This is sometimes due to the separation of the two systems. That is, if you don't have richer people entering the system of public schools and going primarily to private schools, the only people who are asking for funding to public education are people who are more vulnerable, who don't have enough money, and therefore often are people who are voiceless, which reduces the incentive in the part of the government to help, which means that the education that people end up receiving is not of a good enough quality. And rural areas are ones that specifically suffer from this because they not only don't have a good enough quality of education, but the number of schools that exist are often lower because you don't have enough money. And often the population density is also lower in those areas. And then therefore, it's just harder to set up public services in the absence of establishing an economy of scale. So if your nearest school is like really far away, it's unlikely you're going to be able to go because there are transportation costs involved and other things, which means that the funding gap is a major barrier to education that exists for vulnerable populations. I think the second thing is just people's own economic status, right? So poor people can't afford education in private schools, but even within public schools, if it's free or if it's really low cost, there's still an opportunity cost to sending your child to school. That is, if they're going to a school, then you often can't have them supplement the family income. So, for example, in rural areas, often in India, boys are asked to work in farms and fields instead of going to school because they think that's what's helpful for their family right now, which is really bad because that means the cycle of poverty that they're stuck in ends up continuing. I think the final thing then is just social perceptions, that you don't think education is that valuable or could actually help you that much. But I think specifically in terms of girls not having access to education, it's things like you not believing the role of a woman is to go out into the world and receive an education, but rather stay at home. So I think work needs to be done to limit the funding gaps that exist, to make sure that people have enough money, doesn't actually cost them to send their child to school, and that we also work towards improving the societal perceptions of education for everyone.
All right, Avni. Thank you so much for enlightening us regarding all the issues and especially the girl child getting education in India. It is a really important topic to talk on, and yeah, I would request all the other speakers to please mention your topics. Yes, so Kangsha will now speak about the affirmation actions. So yeah, on to you, Kangsha. Kangsha, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I would talk about the affirmative actions which government has taken in education to reduce the disadvantages which are there for the marginalized section. And what is government doing? So basically, we'll start with constitution. In our constitution, Article 15 and Article 16 talks about affirmative action. Clause 4, 5, and 6 talks about the affirmative actions in government schools, colleges, in private school, colleges, as well as in government employment. So we'll not talk about Article 16, which is about jobs. We'll talk about Article 15, which is about education. So affirmative actions are not only about the marginalized sections when we are talking about SCs, STs, OBCs, and EWS, but also for women's. So these are the marginalized sections. For ST, government has given 7.5% reservation. For SC, it is 15% reservation. For OBC, it is 27% reservation. And the new clause added after 103rd Amendment of Constitutional is economically weaker sections. For them, 10% reservations. So government is, of course, trying to as Avni has talked about barriers. So with affirmative actions, government is trying to uh, bridge that barriers and probably give not equality, but at least equity to the people who are marginalized. Also, a special care has been taken with different schemes of educations, such as providing scholarships to marginalized sections, having some.
क्या हुआ?
Excuse me, Sri Lakshmi, I think your speaker is on. Can you mute it? Thank you. Okay. So, yes, so the government is taking a lot of affirmative action in terms of reservations and also in terms of providing scholarships, also in terms of attracting people to come and attend schools so that they will at least get enrolled into the school. So this is what government is doing. So for example, government is giving is running Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao because women are also marginalized section. We should never forget that. For women's, the second for SC/ST categories, we have various. They don't have to pay fees. Their fees is literally laid off by the government. So I'm not particularly pinpointing on any caste, but marginalized sections for them. The fees has been laid off, scholarships are given, they are encouraged, and with this, the government is making sure that they enroll into the education and they get what they want. This is what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Akanksha. I would like to call upon Bhavya for to speak on the topic of equity versus equality. On to you, Bhavya.
Um, just a second. Okay. So I think when it comes to equity and equality, these two terms can be quite interchangeable, like in everyday conversations, but there's a very specific difference between the two. Like equality is basically, giving each individual or a group of people the same resources or opportunities, whereas equity recognizes that each person, they have different circumstances or they have different privileges and what they can or cannot afford, and then providing them with resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. So at the end of the day, the position or the place where each of us stand needs to be equal. But for that to happen, equality is basically giving out equal resources to everyone, which is again correct in its own matter. But at the same time, equity is basically giving out special like mentions and special opportunities to people who are lagging much more behind or are in need of that particular resource or opportunity much more than other people would be and would be happy to receive. Now, equity is the cornerstone of all educational decisions, ensuring all students can thrive in the education system. Now, equitable access to quality education with special emphasis on socioeconomic disadvantaged groups across schools and higher education systems. So basically, in our country, especially where there are a lot of people, where there is a special focus on education, a lot of people are able to afford it, and a lot of the times a lot of people are not able to afford it. So with policies being especially focused on people who are able to get that quality education that they need. So opening schools in more government schools in like areas where people cannot usually are not able to easily access those particular resources, or making policies that focus more on socioeconomic structures or like certain groups who are much more in need of that particular policy. So that is where the difference between equity and equality stands. At the end of the day, both are very, very important, but in context of like education system in India, equity is really, really important for understanding that some people can are in much more need of certain like policies, of certain um, resources than other people who might be able to get those things for themselves. So I think that is where the this meaning of the equity versus equality stands.
Thank you, Bhavya. You have really emphasized on a very important point here that policymakers should keep it in mind regarding equity in the education system. And yes, as budding policymakers, or rather advocates of policy, we would want to keep this in mind for our future generations. So now I would like to call upon Mukul to speak on the report of inclusion and equity. On to you, Mukul.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So, so I would like to talk on, as Jessica suggested, report on inclusion and so according to the goal 4 of the 2030 Global Agenda for Sustainable Development adopted by India in 2015, we seek for equal, inclusive and equitable education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all by 2030. So this report is from actually as 2020. Some professor has given their suggestions for how to include this inclusion and equity in our Indian education system. So the first professor I would like to talk about is Professor Anita Julka. who is the coordinator in NCRT, and also was coordinator of the session which happened back then. So what said that uh, she started by giving an overview of inclusion equity in NAP 2020. She explained that the socio-economical disadvantaged group are broadly categorized based on gender identities, social cultural identities, geographical identities, disabilities including learning disabilities, and socio-economic conditions such as migrant communities, low-income household children, and vulnerable situations. So she wants to promote research through light on effectiveness of various provision, establishing special education zones, building free standard boarding facilities available in school location, strengthening Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalayas and building Vidyalayas and facilities, building additional special hostel, Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas and Kendra Vidyalayas, especially in aspirational district. She also wants to point. She also pointed to the provision in RPWD Act 2016, which the policy has adapted. So, the second professor I would like to talk about was Smriti Swarup, who is a director of SNDT University. She talked about the philosophy underlying inclusion and equity and its implication for interventions. She highlighted the NEP 2020 is based on the premise children who learn together, learn to live together. She commented that inclusion and equity are embedded in every aspect of the policy across the level, right from foundational stage to higher education. So, Professor Swarup mentioned numerous challenges in the implementation of the policies, but also suggested these challenges could be treated as opportunities for reform and achieving inclusivity in the school system. Some of her recommendations were all mainstream schools should become capable of educating all children in their local communities, provide quality education to all learners through assistive device, technology-based tools, appropriate teaching, learning materials, create a system of teaching and learning that is competency-based instead of content-based, establish school clusters to develop consensus around inclusion and equity, establish school clusters to develop consensus around inclusion and equity. Hello, hello,
Um,
hello.
Hello, Kul?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you're now audible. We
Yeah, am
lost
I
you for a
audible?
second. Yes, now you're audible.
Yeah, I lost the connection. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, it's okay. Continue.
Yeah, so moving ahead, she talked about establishing school cluster to develop consensus around inclusive values and with school communities, create learning environment that embrace diversity, a positive environment that respond to the needs of learners beyond academics. So now third professor, which I would like to talk about is Dr. Anupam Ahuja. She's a professor at DEGSN and head of IID NCRT. She shared a presentation on universal design of learning for effective classrooms. She began by highlighting that 3.22 crore school children in the age group of 6
Yeah, I think we lost Mukul again. I think he's having some connectivity issues. Okay, moving on. Is there anyone else who wants to add on to a point regarding the topic? Um, okay, let's call a few names. What about Urmi? Urmi, would you like to contribute to the discussion? Okay. Sanya?
Yes.
Yeah, would you like to contribute to the discussion?
Um, this is actually my first policy Manthan, so I've just been listening to
Okay.
everyone. I
Okay.
really like the aspect of equitable that Bhavya spoke about. I think it's very important, and I think that is something that you learn from the beginning itself, and that is that is the basis of the discussion we're having today. I also wanted to explore something that I think Mukul mentioned about based education, not content based education. I think that's very important for people who generally have a lack of resources, and also important to engage them and interest them in what needs interest students. So I feel like that's something I would want to explore even further. I'm not exactly sure how this works, so I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. You did mention a pretty valid point. Yes. So Mukul, yeah, I see you're back. Would you like to continue with your
Yeah, so
point?
yeah, I would like to continue, not a problem, not an issue.
Yes. Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a second. Yeah, so I was talking about Anupam Ahuja. She stated that inclusion will lead to decreased diversity in classroom. Sorry, I was not there. Okay. NAP 2020 also accorded highest priority to inclusion and equal participation of children with disability, and provides that these children will be enabled to fully participate in the development process from the foundational stage to higher education. Professor Ahuja also stated that inclusion will lead to increased diversity in the classroom, which is to be welcomed by all teachers and all stakeholders. She highlighted that research shows that the learning needs of children are as unique as their fingerprints. In order to provide equal opportunity to children in diverse classroom, the curriculum and needs to be formulated based on the principles of universal design of learning. She observed that this will minimize
So I think we lost him again. Is there anybody else who would like to contribute to this discussion? Um, Shreyashi, would you like to add something to this discussion?
Um, Actually, I googled the topic and I came out with an article which was posted on Times of India. Uh, it started with until we get equality in education, we won't have an equal society. It was quoted by Sonia Maria, who was Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of in United States. So in this article, it was basically said that uh, one second. India has overall literacy rate of 77%, with literacy rate of 84.4% for men and 71.50% for women. On several programs on policies, as well as combined efforts of Indian government, state governments, local bodies, and district level, uh, they led the country to prosperity through education for all. Despite of all this improvement towards the education, there are some other challenges which should be concerned about, like lower enrollment rates in upper primary and secondary and higher education, as well as high dropout rates in elementary and secondary school, uh, particularly among socially and economically disadvantaged children. And she also mentioned so many successful policies like mid-day meal scheme, Sharbo Shikha Abhijan, Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, like this. And yeah, that's it. And she also mentioned uh, language, religion, and discrimination based on caste. These all why these are the reasons for inequality in education. Yeah.
Thank you, Shreyashi. That is very insightful. So moving forward, Sonal, would you like to share your thoughts on this idea, on this topic of equity in education?
Hello, I'm so sorry for being late. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. So, first of all, I thought the meeting starts from 8 p.m., so that's why I was late. And yeah, as far as I know about the Indian education equity system, like very few educational documents at the government level in the independent India have attempted to trace the quality which the Indian government provides, and it is being interrupted by the several remedies which uh,
I think we lost her. So, all right, if nobody else has anything to contribute to this discussion, then I would just like to add that with the new education policy and the implementation of various policies of the government that have happened recently, we have seen a huge improvement in the quality of education in this country. However, I believe that equity in education system not only refers to the equal access of education to all, but also the equal representation of all through education. Education should be inclusive and be relevant to all the people of all sections of the society. For instance, history is one of the primary branches of social science, which educates the masses of the past. Therefore, it is extremely crucial for educators and policymakers to keep a neutral stance while educating the young minds about the historical facts about their past and that of their country. Distorted or manipulated presentation of history often marginalizes specific sections of the society and is therefore a breach of equity in education. So, as we're close to concluding this session, I would thank everybody for taking out time to join us for this discussion today. And I think, yes, we can conclude here.
Thank you everyone for joining. See you all next week.
Yes, thank you.